All right, I think we can start now. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning to everyone. So first of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Izhar Firdaus bin Ismail, Head of Data Engineering Product Development from Abyres Holding Sdn. Right, so it is an honor that we have Mr. Izhar today with us. So Abyres is actually a system integrator company focusing in consulting and implementation of state-of-the-art solutions around open source IT infrastructure and data center modernization. So the title for the talk today will be the real applications of Python in industries. So I would like to say thank you to those lecturers that joined with us today. Dr. Adam, we have Dr. Adam, Dr. Norianti, Dr. Bazli, Dr. Noratika, Dr. Azwana, Ms. Zahira, and a few others. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Izhar Firdaus to deliver his talk.
Okay, so Assalamualaikum, good morning. All right, so let me just share my slide first. So I was communicated, these are all mathematics students, I suppose, under the math department, correct, right? Ms. Aziz or Dr. Aziz?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so let me just find my slide window. Okay, so first, before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Izhar, currently the head of data engineering product development in Abyres Technologies, which is basically a company that focus on a lot of open source type of solutions to the market. On the same time, besides my day job, I also involved in a number of open source projects, primarily this project called Fedora project, if you ever use Linux and ever heard of Fedora Linux. So I'm part of the contributor in that project, where I've been serving as an ambassador since since I was student time, so more than 10 years now. I'm also an open source advocate and contributor, where I also contribute to several open source projects out there, primarily in Python, and been doing Python programming for, I think this year should be 15 years now. So in open source world, I contribute to a number of open source projects like Fedora, Plone, which is a Python-based CMS, and this is Python framework of Mopath, which is created by one of my friends, and then there's one JavaScript framework called Wakil. So been doing Python since 2005. So pretty much my main programming language is Python, and I rarely touch other languages. Okay. Right, so I suppose all of you guys have heard of Python or no? So I mean, oh yeah, I mean let's just go for the flow. So there's a chat box in Google Meet at the side. If you have any question, feel free to ask there, and I'll answer along the way. So feel free to also ask a question without waiting until the end. So if you, for example, you have some question on particular slide, just feel free to ask. All right. So, what is a Python programming language? Okay. This is the Python programming language. If so I think most of people in IT or in any programming, when they start programming, usually they'll start doing in C. And one thing about C programming is that you have a lot of the syntax thing that people need to remember. While Python as a language, it is a programming language, is simpler to understand and simpler to write. So this is built by this guy called Guido in Netherlands, roughly around 1991, which is older than the Java programming language. The focus of Python is more on readability and clear and concise syntax, and with his dynamic typing, it makes writing program much easier. So this Guido guy, he's also worked in the mathematical field. So one of the, and because Python is built by a mathematician to a certain degree, it have quite a rich library and support for mathematical work. So for a mathematician to do programming, Python is a much easier language to work with. Okay. So it is very popular among scientific and mathematics community, and also recently, thanks to data science and data engineering, a lot of people starting to also look into using Python in enterprise software development. So we expect to see quite a bit of growth in usage in Python in the next 5 to 10 years, especially in the enterprise, because more and more software start to support Python as a way to script and automate the software. Okay, so Python is quite a versatile language. It allows the programmer to build a lot of things, like command line tools, web-based application, desktop applications, embedded system, data processing apps, desktop games, mobile apps to a certain degree. Robotics also is quite popular in robotics world. AI, image processing, and a lot of other things. So if you are doing machine learning, especially considering you guys are mathematics coming from the mathematics side, if you're doing machine learning and those kind of predictive analytics, Python also provide quite a lot of libraries and algorithms that you can work with to achieve your goals around machine learning and data processing. It is also a very powerful glue language, which makes it very nice for data work, because when it comes to Python language itself is quite slow, relatively slow in execution time. However, because it can call other languages out there, such as calling C functions, calling Java functions, calling functions written in R, it you can allow you to use the best tool for the job. Okay, so if you need like very heavy data computation that Python takes too slow to compute, you can write that computation in C or C++, and then let Python do more the business logic kind of layer where it calls the C function. So it also this glue capability and this glue feature of Python, it makes it a very powerful language to building a more complex system, which may consist various tool of libraries written in a lot of different languages. Okay, so why you should use Python? One of it is open source. So because it's open source, you can always download it and use it. And there's a big community out there that will be able to support you and help you out if you're stuck. So if you take a look at Facebook, there is there is number of Python user group that you can just join in and ask questions there. It is a language that is easy to learn and write. So this is ideal, especially if you are not a programmer in your main job. So the nature of easy to read, learn and write in Python make it like you can just focus on your mathematical model rather than wasting so much time figuring out how to manage memory and things like that. So so you improve productivity and by allowing you to focus on your business logic and then allow you to integrate with many programming language ecosystem. Okay, wait. Right, so in Abyres, how we are using Python, one of it, so Abyres itself, as a company, we are pretty much a Python shop because our focus is a lot on data engineering and system and IT infrastructure. So we use Python quite a bit in moving and transforming data, where in a number of projects that we are doing, such as the data race at Awam, inside Telecom Malaysia, we also do a number of data warehousing and data lake, where we build a lot of Python program which connect to data sources, extract out the data, clean up this data set, and then prepare it in a repository where data analysts can start to pick up this data and use it for their whatever analysis that they need to do. So we also use Python to build applications that help to manage data that have been collected, and then also building application that allow users to view the data set in a visualized manner. We also use Python for rapid application development, where if a customer requests for simple information management application, we use Python to build these applications, such as data entry apps and data visualization apps. And alongside that, we also use Python for for system automation, where we write number of Python program to deploy software inside servers. We saw like few, like 20-30 server in one go by using a single command and things like that. Okay, now going to the topic in hand, which is Python used in the industry. Python has been around for, I guess, 20 years now, and over the past 15 years, Python is mainly used by people who really appreciate programming to a certain degree. So there's not many adoption of Python up until, I think, roughly about up until 5 to 6 years ago. But a number of companies have been using Python a lot in their ecosystem, such as this company called Industrial Light and Magic. If you know what this, you guys watch Star Wars, I guess. So ILM uses Python extensively inside their ecosystem for automating code development, which I'll cover on the next slide later. Google also is quite a bit of Python shop. So if you ever use diorang punya dia punya help center and a number of other things internally, which is not quite visible to a lot of people, but Google also using Python quite a bit. Facebook and Petronas also is using Python. Because like about 2 years ago in the Python conference in University Malaya, one of their guys came forward and then gave a talk about how Petronas using Python to do some prediction stuff, which I'll cover on the next slide. Okay, and if you guys use Instagram, there's also one of the big user in Python, where the whole Instagram infrastructure was initially built in Python, so that they can like grow quickly, both in terms of feature and scale. All right. So in the industry, a lot of Python users split into two types. One will be the tech guys, and another one will be the non-tech guys. So the tech guys is quite obvious. We use it to increase productivity, allow us to build a lot more complex things in a shorter amount of time with less amount of people. While in the non-tech industry, Python is heavily used for data analysis. So, and also things that involve a lot of mathematical computations. So some of the success stories, if you go to python.org, you can see a full list of Python success stories where a number of different industry using it. So you can go to python.org/about/success. There, you should be able to see a whole list of it. So I took most of my content here inside this talk coming from that page. So let's go through that first. So far there's no question. Yes. Right. So in software industry, Python is naturally one of the common place it is being used. So people like Instagram use it for their their application. The application that you use, the Instagram web application site, that's written in Python. Where Google, Facebook, Netflix, these are shops that really use Python for a lot of data work. Okay. While Dropbox also as a site uses Python extensively inside their thing to build their web application. So common use case in tech industry, Python is used to build web app, okay, web APIs, building backend tools, building command line software, and also building automation AI systems. Right. Besides that, Python is also used for moving data around, processing data, doing machine learning, and do those kind of prediction stuff. Okay. Well, so if you guys have ever watched Star Wars, in the film industry, Python is heavily used in industrial lights and magic to do a lot of this part where they manage their IT infrastructure that do this rendering to make the graphical rendering so that to render it for the movie. Okay, so what they have inside ILM is that they have a huge cluster of Linux servers, where this cluster of servers, these are in charge of rendering the images that you see inside the end result of the movie. So how they use Python, they what do you call it? How they use Python there? This IT infrastructure need to run a number of data processing job to estimate the lights, estimates the visual effect, so that it can compute how the light fall on the model. Okay, so this infrastructure is coordinated and managed by Python, and at the same time, they have this computer graphic application internally, where that application uses Python to compute a number of special effects inside their movies. Okay, and besides that, because they already been building a lot of their internal application in Python, all the CG and IT infrastructure in Python, their internal apps such as those inventory system and things like that is also they use Python to build it, because once you have invested quite a bit on a bunch of programmers or the language, it make it quite easy for them to also expand the language usage to build whatever they need to operate. Okay. In medical industry, Python is heavily used in data computation. Okay, where one example would be this AstraZeneca. Okay, this is a pharmaceutical company, and how they use Python would be is that these guys, they have this software called H2X, and inside there, this H2X software do data simulation in identifying how molecule will interact with the body, how a molecule will interact with other molecules. This software have a component called drone, which helps to compute this molecular property calculation. And this drone component originally was built using Perl. So what they faced during that time is that because it's written in Perl, when data analysts need to extend the capability of H2X, Perl as a language is not easy to work with. So they decided that to rewrite things to Python. So once they rewrite things to Python, it makes it easier for data analysts to write the data computation punya program and integrate with the rest of the H2X ecosystem, so that they can use it for simulating drug interaction, so for drug discovery. Okay, so you can read more on that link down there. And Python is also used heavily in scientific field, where again for data computation. So this university called French National Center of Scientific Research, they uses Python quite a lot for molecular modeling. Okay, so what they did is they take Python and then they build a program to simulate molecular behavior lah. Okay, I'm not quite sure how on the detail on this. So they use it to simulate molecular interaction and behavior. Okay, while in Malaysia, this is something that we got to know during the Python conference about 2 years ago. Petronas also apparently using Python as one of the tools for predicting petroleum reserve. So in Petronas, or in any petroleum company in that sense, when they need to identify a new petroleum well, they have to really make sure that that area memang ada petroleum. So they use a number of tools, and one of it is Python and deep learning, of which they use the data that they collect from their sensors and try to identify and predict whether is this area truly have petroleum or not. They cross-check this again with all other data analysis software that they have, and once they are very sure, only then they start to invest in drilling there. So the research team uses Python and TensorFlow, which is a deep learning library in Python, as one of the many tools used to predict the location of the petroleum reserve available. In air traffic control also, Python is also used for controlling air traffic. So this company called Frequentis, they built their air traffic management and public safety application called Tap Tools in Python, where the tower uses this to manage air traffic control. Okay, so apa nama lagi? Right, so this slide is quite detailed. Right, so those are the list of companies here. These are companies that really came forward to announce that they use Python. Right, there are a lot of other companies out there, especially in recent time, where if you start to see any company that say they do AI, any company that say they do data analysis, any company that say they do robotics, high chances you will encounter Python in the ecosystem. So take for example, even company like TM, they have this system called mediation. They themselves are not aware that they're using Python there because it was done by a vendor, where this mediation system uses Python to manage the movement of data from one system to another system. So if you are as a mathematician, as for you guys, Python would be a one of the core usage of Python that you probably encounter out there would heavily be in data analysis. Okay, so apa nak cakap ni? Sikit lah. Alright. Okay, so when you want to start using Python for your data analysis work or for whatsoever, like if you need to develop some app for your data analysis job ke apa kan, or data analysis project, some useful libraries that you can start to look into would be if you're doing web application development, you can check out some libraries such as the Mohd framework, Django and Flask. So this Mohd framework is something that I wrote. If you need to collect data from websites, say for example, you have, there's a website that consists that presents some data set out there, and you want to, for example, macam nak collect, you go to Yahoo stock, for example, and you want to collect data out. You can write a web scraper which loads up this website and extract out these tables that you see on the website. So Scrapy would be one library that will help you a lot in extracting and collecting data out from these websites. If you're doing scientific computing, where you need to touch a lot of machine learning or type to machine learning libraries, you can take a look at a library called SciPy, or another one would be PySpark. So if you're dealing with large amount of data, or what people call today big data, libraries such as PySpark will help a lot because their algorithm can distribute across multiple server for heavy data computation. If you're trying to build some simple GUI desktop application, or even a complex one, you can take a look at a library called PyQt, PyGTK, and Kiwi, where Kiwi will also help you to build mobile apps. If you need to use distributed computing, you can take a look at PySpark and Dask. And if you want to build some data visualization dashboard, there's this project called Apache Superset, which is written in Python, which allow you to visualize data. Data processing, again, PySpark, Dask, and Pandas. If you need to interact with databases, so somebody have collected data inside a database or an application, kan? If you need to interact with SQL databases, SQL Alchemy is one of the good library to use. If you need to generate some files according to a template, you can try Jinja. Or if you're into robotics and you're playing around with Raspberry Pi and controlling servo and want to build robots, for example, there is this project called the ROS, called Robotic Operating System. This is written completely in Python, where you can use it, where they carry quite a bit of useful functions for robotics and automation. If you need to build some IoT devices, for example, for collecting data, the number of chips out there support running Python inside using a particular distribution of Python called MicroPython. We can use Python to program these microchips. If you're into cyber security and malware analysis, there is Killing framework where you can also use it to simulate some desktop environment for reverse engineering purposes. If you are doing deployment automation, you can try out Ansible to deploy your application. And there's a lot more libraries out there that is available that will definitely help in your data computation punya assignment, data visualization assignments, where you can always go to this website called pyp.org, where the Python community upload their packages there. So you can always just go there, pyp.org, and search for whatever you want. So maybe I just share a different screen where I just go to pyp.org, where, yeah, stop presenting. Let me just share the whole screen. Right. So this pyp.org, say for example, you want to find a library for data visualization. There's a number of visualization libraries out there, such as these guys. Okay, from Berkeley Auto Lab, you can take a look at the homepage there. Okay, yeah, they do have a nice website. Oh yeah, full documentation. Okay, they just have the computer there. Or maybe, so this is for data visualization. If you want to do for like machine learning, you can find a number of machine learning libraries there. Okay, if I want to find for libraries for robotics, there's a number of robotics that you can tap into. So Python has a very rich ecosystem that will help you to become more productive and build things faster for whatever project that you're trying to do lah. So there's like what 280,000 repositories, libraries is being available inside this particular repository. Okay, so I think that's pretty much. Oh, hello.
Hello, boleh interrupt?
Ya, boleh.
Saya nak tanya, kalau untuk statistik, which one do you prefer?
Statistics. What kind of statistics? Can you be specific on models ke?
On the regression ke, on the prediction ke?
Prediction, the most common one would be SciPy. So SciPy is have quite a bit of predictive libraries. Let me just check under punya documentation. So here for SciPy you have integration, optimization, interpolation, signal processing, linear algebra, sparse graph, so statistics punya libraries. So SciPy right now is the most popular one out there. So, but however, SciPy, I would generally use SciPy if the data is not that big. If the data is very big, I would recommend to use PySpark. So PySpark, yeah. So PySpark also carry a number of model. PySpark machine learning. PySpark ML. Yeah. So here, PySpark ML. Mana dia punya? So PySpark ML have a number of algorithm for clustering okay, for recommendation, regression, linear algebra, basic statistics, and usual statistics. So which one you choose is really goes back to preference, but generally for me, SciPy is great when the data is not too big, but when the data go into the terabytes layer, I would start to use PySpark because PySpark is more distributed lah. However, PySpark leceh sikit deploy. Install leceh sikit. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Right. Any more question?
okay.
Because I don't have that many slides, so that's pretty much all the slide I have. So now I think it's question lah. There's a question in chat. What package in Python for clustering, classification, and association? Similar. SciPy can do clustering, classification. Association, I'm not familiar sangat dengan that term, but let's see. So clustering, yeah. So clustering package, API reference. So clustering SciPy and clustering library there. So VQ and hierarchy. And then interpolate, like, so that's clustering. PySpark punya clustering, dia support by setting k-means, dia support apa nama lagi? Kau ambil lah. K-means summary, k-means model, Gaussian mixture. There's number of algorithm there. Okay. Basket analysis. Okay, that one I'm not familiar sangat, but I believe there is always a library there. Yeah. So let's see. These guys, they're using pandas and ML extend. So in this guy, they use a library called ML extend to do their association rule in this particular article. In DataCamp, they use it. Wait, this one tak ada, not free online. In this one, they uses ML extend juga. So you can try ML extend lah, I guess, for basket analysis. Seems like multiple people are using it. Okay. Oh, sorry. Alright. Any more question? None. If there's none, I think that's pretty much all my talk is.
Any more questions for the audience? Anyone?
Especially from the student, isn't it, Dr. Aziz?
Yeah, especially from the student.
They need.
Yes. I did not hear any voice from the student yet.
Anything you want me to share ke apa? Tadi we have quite a bit of time kan, because I couldn't find much content to apa nama ni, to panjangkan the talk. But definitely if you're talking about Python in industry, a lot of people doesn't come forward that they are using it. But generally, the moment you see something is involving data and data movement, high chances you see it there.
Mohd Izhar,
Mm-hmm.
we know that the computer programming language is a language that many people hate to learn, especially the students.
Okay.
So any inspiration or advice to the students to make them motivated in learning the computer programming, because this is very important in data analytics, one of the elements in data analytics.
Okay, so a lot of people hate programming, but take note here, when you're dealing with data, how are you going to compute besides programming? Because say for example, if you have only 1 million row, you can use Excel. But if you want to do more complex data processing, programming is actually an extension of mathematics. It's just mathematics. The base of programming is mathematics, where functions is similar to the same functions that you use in math. It's come from the same concept. Structure also come from the same concept. Okay. in mathematics. So programming is the act of apa nama ni? Is the act of automating mathematics. So by learning programming, you will, as a mathematician, you will need to know some level of programming so that you can write your mathematical formula ke apa ke and make that computation repetitive. Make that computation reusable so that you can use it in a repeated manner. So, say for example, you already figure out how to calculate something lah kan. You turn it into a programming function, and this function you can then use it again and again and again without having to kira balik lah. So at least from the perspective of mathematician, that's the main goal that you should be looking at in while you are learning programming, because takkan every time you want to drag the Excel sheet, you want to tekan calculator every time. So automating this work allows you to focus more on things that matters, and then at the same time allows other people to benefit on your calculation algorithm without having to know how to calculate it manually. That's, I think, what I can say for mathematics guy lah. So because if you don't know programming, it's very easy for you to be replaced by somebody who have programmed the algorithm in automation. Okay, so in the past 5 to 6 years, a lot of software has start to come out there that automates calculation for whatever purpose. So if you don't know programming, one is that you cannot be the person who built this software, and if you don't know programming also, this software will just start to replace you very quickly. Okay, so there's a question there, maybe how I can illustrate how I use Python in my work. So Abyres as a company, even my department, we are pretty much an IT organization. So Python to us is a tool that help us to do our work faster. Okay, in the data engineering department, how we use Python in our work is, say apa nama ni, a particular client, they want to connect to a particular database and then extract the data out, say for example customer data set. So we use Python there to Satu, write a program to connect to the database, extract the data out. Once the data has been extracted, we use Python for apa nama ni, once data has been extracted out, we build a number of data validation rules, for example, to measure whether the data quality is correct, is okay or not. And then we write some Python script to transform the data set in an easy to use manner. Because when it comes to theory of data management, usually in data warehousing and data management, raw data are too complicated for end user to use. So what we do, we prepare the data set in an easy to use structure using Python, and then save it in the database somewhere for the end user to use the data set lah, for data analysts to use the data set. Other type of usage in Python in the company is we use it again for the application development. This is just standard software development lifecycle. Customer ada software they want to build, they have some requirements, then we use Python to speed up our software development lah. So some of the things that we are building right now internally is to automate software development to a certain degree, where we just tested iaitu to build one project. Previously, when the other team was using Java to build things, it takes about like 2 or 3 months for them to come out with something on the application side. But when we start to use Python, especially on the framework that we do it ourselves, the project start to cut down building the same thing cut down to less than a month. Okay. Alright, so there's another question there. What will be the difference between NumPy and SciPy? Okay, NumPy is a Python library that help with numerical to handling numbers. So here's the thing about Python, the native integer apa semua dalam Python kan is a bit slow for computation. By slow here means, by milliseconds slow lah, something like that. So the NumPy project, they convert this data structure, and especially for matrix calculation, into C libraries that Python can call. So this allows Python programmers to do more complex data calculation without the performance impact of the built-in integer data type and float data type inside Python. So NumPy is primarily that, a library that help with speeding up data computation in Python, while SciPy builds another layer above of NumPy. So SciPy uses NumPy to do scientific calculation. By scientific calculation here means they create algorithms for clustering, algorithm for machine learning, algorithms. So they implement those algorithms in Python using NumPy that you can reuse. Okay. Alright, so the next question would be natural language processing. So natural language processing is an emerging market, from my opinion, in Malaysia, where people, so how normally people use NLP kan? NLP, if you want to build a chatbot, for example, you want to build a chatbot that people can understand, that it can understand what the user is requesting, NLP is useful for that. So whether it will be needed in Malaysia or not, there is really subjective. It goes back to what the demand out there lah. So, but for now, while there is a demand, NLP at the moment, the way people are using natural language processing at the moment in Malaysia is still not quite mature yet. So people don't quite understand how to use it at the moment. But it will probably reach there. And there is a requirement for Malay language support. It's just that whether people are want to pay for it or not is a bit tricky at the moment lah. Okay, so if you are a student, to master Python, this one is just practice. Programming, just like other tacit skill macam sewing, macam bertukang, these are skills that you pick up by practice. So as a student, when you want to be good in Python, you need to practice. So one thing that I usually suggest, like some new joiner in Abyres apa semua kan, is to pick up a pet project. Say for example, in my case, as a software engineer, I will, whenever I pick up a new programming language or a new programming tool, I will try to build something like a forum. Okay, so I identify a pet project that you can do and start to work on this project and just keep on improving it. Use it as a way for you to practice. Okay, so the more you practice, the more you encounter error, the more you resolve this error, the more you understand why a certain error happened, the better you are in the programming language, regardless whether it is Python ke C ke apa ke. Okay, why local variable names beginning with underscore is discouraged? This just, okay, in this question, why local variable names beginning with underscore is discouraged? That is just a convention. It's more on trying to make it easier to read only. But there's no real rule on that lah. Personally, local variable, there's no real reason why you should use underscore there, because usually underscore is used for internal system level variables. It's just a convention. Okay. So, question from Nazmi. A lot of people say cleaning data and organizing data is what data people spend the most. Yes, this is what people spend the most, because data sources are usually written for the goal of the programmer of the data collection system. They are not, the way they store the data there is optimized for storing and querying. It's not optimized for analytics. So a lot of time, data set is either dirty because the application didn't validate this data set, and or data structure is poorly documented. Data structure is difficult to use because the application have denormalized the data set into a lot of different tables. So how Python can help the process is that when you want to clean data, you need to write a lot of automation script to replace value, to identify whether a value is valid or invalid. So you can achieve this with any programming language, but with Python, this process become a bit simpler because you are focusing now just on the logic. You don't have to focus too much on the codes of the programming language itself, like figuring out data type lah, figuring out how to compile, what library you need to import to compile, figuring out how to create the right binaries. So with Python, you can do this a bit more quickly compared to other language. It's not that other languages cannot do it, they can. But with Python, it's just a bit simpler to do lah. Okay, trading. Alright, trading in Python, there's a library called trading. However, please take note that Python have this thing called the global interpreter log, where the trade, which cause trading to not really using multiple CPU. So I would recommend when you need to compute a lot of data set, you don't use trading. What you do is that you use multi-processing library, where in this case, it will really make sure that multiple CPU will be working on the same data set. So multi-processing library is available inside the core standard library there. Okay, this question from Sarah will be, how easy it is to learn Python? How easy it is to learn Python? I mean, relatively speaking, it's much easier than other language because in other languages, you have a lot of things to think about. One, you need to think about data types. You need to think about memory management. You need to think about static, non-static, apa semua tu. But with Python, you can go straight to the point where you just throws right the whatever that you're trying to achieve there lah. So to really feel how easy Python compared to other programming language, that one you can try out other language and see which one is easier. Okay. Robotics company that uses Python in Malaysia, I'm not that familiar, but if I'm not mistaken, Aerodyne, the guys who build those drones, have some Python stuff inside there. But again, I need to double check with that. That one not familiar sangat. But again, robotics, a lot of time also robotics, they don't really mention what they're using. Oh yeah, this one my boss just mentioned yesterday. He was playing around with his BMW, and he just pasang this OBD2 connector kat bawah tu kan. He just realized that the BMW automation, the script inside the car is actually Python. So that's some of the so-called robotics company that probably use Python out there lah, because car automation is technically robotics. Okay. Alright, so why speed is not a crucial factor? In data science, the most crucial factor is figuring out the algorithm. Once you have figured out the algorithm, the process, the steps to compute the data, once you get your result, only then speed becomes crucial. Okay, so if you spend so much time in C++, etc., to build your algorithm, you might end up not meeting out your deadline. Okay, so in data science, especially the modern data science, where you are tied to business, deadlines are important. It's more important than anything. People who want result that you give within the deadline, they will appreciate that you get your result faster rather than the speed of the processing. If you can just add more server, it's easier to do that than to spend more time to try to build a very optimized C++ code to compute that. On the same time also, when we use Python, a lot of time, Python data computation library are written in Java and C. Say for example, PySpark. PySpark, you build your algorithm on top of Python, but the low-level execution happens in Java. So that gives a balance there lah, where you can be more productive. On the same time, data computation is still relatively fast, where it is executed in C and Java lah. Okay. How do you know your prediction is correct? Okay, on this part, I think you better ask your lecturer because I'm not that strong in machine learning. But generally, how do you know your prediction is correct? You you double check balik with the original data. So in machine learning, you always need to train your model. So when you're training your model, that means you will have a data set that say this is the correct output and these are the features that will lead to this correct output. Then you train your model again. So to know whether your prediction is correct, your model should be able to get very similar results. Okay, so if it predict the same or very similar results to the training data, then high chances that your prediction is correct. However, be careful with overfitting. Overfitting means that your model is too sensitive that yes, it get a very accurate result against your test data, but the moment you give a different data set, the prediction become wrong. So generally the strategy is to take half, say for example you have 1 million row of data that you use for training, and you take maybe 500,000 row, you use it for training, and then you use the next 500,000 row to validate whether the model is trained correctly. Yeah. Okay. Is Python is the best programming language for data analysis? This one is really subjective, but so far, this is the best programming language to be productive and be fast. Okay, in terms of human time. So and because Python at the moment is one, because on the early stage of Python, it is heavily used by mathematicians, scientific community. Python have a very rich ecosystem of data analysis library and algorithms compared to other languages. So so for now, yeah, this is the, in a way, subjectively the best programming language for data analysis, but something else might replace later in the future, we don't know. Julia seems to be picking up, but again, without the rich ecosystem of library, the language is not that interesting to use most of the time. Because when it comes to programming languages, is the ecosystem of library lah yang make the programming language become more useful and how to say it, the best for that particular purpose. Okay, any more? If you want clarifications, anybody yang from the answer that I answered earlier, if you have some more question related to that, you just ask.
Any more questions?
So talking about speed again, kan? Why speed is not a crucial factor? A lot of time, okay, this is saying, yeah, human time is more expensive than CPU time. So paying a salary of a very expensive PhD guy to handle data science versus just spawning a number of CPU dekat cloud, it's cheaper to just spawn the CPU dekat cloud for 1 or 2 hours than to than to spend so much money on a PhD guy to spend writing C++ code in a very optimized manner. Okay. Any more? Okay, PYQT and TK Inter. Okay, TK Inter, this is a more traditional library. TK Inter has been around for a very long time. It supports Windows, Linux, and Mac, if I'm mistaken. But PYQT is a bit more modern. So if you use, let's just look around for Qt application. Okay, so Qt apps allows for a more modern UI, while TK Inter is a bit more traditional. Okay, so these are some of the Qt apps out there. You can just some of the UI design. Okay, if you compare TK Inter punya UI design, a bit more old, because TK Inter was built in the 80s without much of this one. Is it TK Inter? No, I don't think this is TK Inter. Right, so TK Inter was built on the 80s where the UI is a bit more ancient sikit lah. That's the primary difference. Okay, right. Any more? So generally, if you want to build a cross-platform application, I would recommend PyQt. If you are heavily using Linux and you are mostly on GNOME, the GNOME desktop environment, like the one I'm using right now, my laptop is on Linux. PyGTK is a nicer one because it integrates better with the UI. So when people are choosing between GUI libraries, most of the time the consideration is whether is it pretty or not, can it achieve the UI design that they envision lah. Okay, so PyQt is a bit more powerful compared to TK is a bit more basic. It's been around for a long time. Okay. Any more?
Any more questions?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mr. Izhar, my name is Nurianti Muhammad. So I just want to add what you said just now. As a mathematician or statistician, actually, we learned all the model or method used in the Python, isn't it? I mean the package too, or the functions in the Python actually based on the modeling that we learned theoretically.
Yep.
So I just want to add up, as you said before, we as a mathematician and statistician, we can improve the model actually, and then we function it, then the other can use it. So for better improvement in the finding of prediction lah. So I think as a student, BSD student, I think this is another part that good for you. Other than we do the programming too, we improve the modeling or the model that have been done before. That's all I want to add up.
Yep, that's one way also. Because say take a look macam just to give an example similar to that. SciPy and PySpark both carry linear regression, for example. Okay, but the difference between PySpark linear regression and SciPy linear regression, they are different in terms of the internal algorithm. Okay, while linear regression in SciPy is optimized for a single core computation, linear regression in PySpark is more for distributed computing. So and the implementation in PySpark might not be the fastest. So that's something that you can try to improve so that the computation become faster. The computation can, or even can get better result with less amount of computation. Those are some of the things that you can also improve as a mathematician lah. Web scraping mentioned just now. What would be the procedure overall? Okay, so procedure overall, let me just find ada tak diagram? Boleh aku ni. Okay, alright. No, not suitable. Okay, usually, so let's just you can refer to this particular diagram kan. So the process would be Satu, first of course, you identify the website you want to scrape your data out. Okay. The next step, you need to write your scrapy application. So this scrapy application is basically a Python script which connect to the website, load the page, and then extract out data from the website. And usually, people will save the data somewhere. Okay. Not necessarily Excel. Most of the time, people just dump it as CSV or dump it as JSON because they're easier to work with. Then after that, you can convert it to Excel. You can convert it to something else afterward lah. Or even masukkan dalam database ke. Okay. This question from Hafiz Hakimi. Can you clarify what you mean by the most worth project you have done using Python? What do you mean by the most worth? Can you clarify that question? Really perhati. I think there are a lot of things lah. Let's take Let's take from before Abyres. Okay, so before Abyres, there was this system that I built for United Nations where we use it to do knowledge management. This agency is in Korea. That project I took about, I think what, half a year to build, but once we deploy it, that application is running without maintenance until now. So that's one thing that I really party that one lah, because that one's it's a very stable app. Other things, there's this one framework that I'm currently working on called this framework. I just typed it down here. So this is something that I'm building right now. It's more like internal research, R&D kind of thing. My goal there is to speed up software development. So this is one thing that I also like. From last week, we did some project there using that thing. Last month, we did some project there using that framework, and things speed up quite a bit. Software development that usually took us 3 or 4 months, we drop it to manage it to drop it to 1 month. Terus other things in Telecom Malaysia, I think there's some scripts there we built to automate the ingestion of data. That one also was quite quality lah. The rest, not quality, not because of Python, more of because of the project itself. That one, let's not cerita about that lah.
Mr. Izhar, do you mind to share the project profit ke the project cost tu? That's mean just to share lah how much they can gain if they
I
put
think that one I think I couldn't share that much, but let's just view it this way lah. Generally, as a senior programmer, usually generally senior programmer, if we charge, a company will charge the client at least 2,000 to 3,000 ringgit per day. And then from there, the company use that money to pay back to as your salary lah. So generally, senior programmer, people will charge 2,000 to 3,000 per day. Junior ones can go from 600 to 1,000 per day, depending on how long to the project. Then you just calculate simply by the number lah, I guess.
Yalah, per day is quite expensive. Not quite very expensive.
Yeah, that's standard pricing also in the market.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Known security vulnerabilities in Python. The core Python itself is pretty secure. If you do found vulnerability, high chances it's not in the core Python. It's in the libraries that you're using. That one is really subject to the library you're using. Some library, if it's well maintained, it will not have security vulnerability. If the library is being written by some dude somewhere 5 years ago and nobody maintaining it, then they might have security vulnerability. So security, when it comes to programming, is really subject to the programmer. It's not about the platform itself. So Python as an open source project, there is a lot of people auditing the code base. I mean the Python interpreter tu kan, there's a lot of people auditing the code base to ensure that it's secure. So every time there's a new vulnerability being discovered, there's always a new patch come out in the next 1 or 2 weeks. Okay. What's the difference between data science and sentiment analysis? Data science is an umbrella term. It means pretty much the field of science of which you just focus on data. Okay, what I mean by field of science here is that you do research. So a lot of scientific fields are research based, kan? So you do research. When you do scientific research on petroleum, you research petroleum itself. While data science, you research the data. Okay, while sentiment analysis is a subset of data science. So you are researching the data so that you will identify some sort of sentiment. What I mean by sentiment here, it's more like you identify a particular emotion that is attached to the data, of which this data set is a data set of text. Okay, so sentiment analysis in action is technically you have a collection of text, like comment ke apa kan, and then you try to compute this text and identify whether this text is angry or this text is not angry or this text is happy and something like that lah. So it's a domain of data science which focus on analyzing text to identify sentiment. That's what sentiment analysis is. which is a subset of natural language processing. Ternary operator. Kejap, let me just double check what was the ternary operator again. The name sound familiar, I just don't remember what was it. See, is it if then else ke? Okay. In Python, ternary operator, if you're talking about this particular function kan, is member and then $2 or $1. In Python, it's implemented in this way. Let me go back to that tab. So ternary operator is done like this. So let's just take the same example from JavaScript here. Okay. So if in JavaScript, you write it that way kan. So in JavaScript, you write it that way, right? If it's in Python, so take a look at the chat box there. So in JavaScript, you do it this way. In Python, it will be $2 if is member, else $10. So this is JavaScript. This is Python. C should be similar to JavaScript. Okay. Right. So that's how ternary operator in Python lah. How you turn it into mathematics, that one I think you guys know better than me. Okay.
Any more questions? Right, one more.
Overtime. Okay. That one, it really go back to how the project is managed. If the project is screw out, then you might end up doing overtime. This one is really go back to project management. If the project can be properly scoped down and you don't get a client that is too demanding, then you don't really need to go to do OT that much. But if you end up with a very highly demanding client or the project manager are not good, then you might end up having to do quite a bit of OT lah. That one is just how it is, regardless of whether it's programming job ke apa ke, construction lebih kurang lah. Okay. Huge project, if you are in control, then most of the time, you don't really need to do it. That's an example of sentiment analysis is some sort of like automatic reply message in Facebook. It's a subset of that. So let's take a look. I think, do I have a way to draw right now? Okay, answering the question, does the example of sentiment analysis is some sort of like automatic reply message in Facebook? It is the subset of it. So when you want to do automatic reply message, the Facebook bot, I suppose you're referring there. So when so what happened? Somebody sent a message. This message is then passed to the Facebook reply handler. The Facebook reply handler will first need to extract out the intent from this message. This intent extractor, somebody is trying to identify what this person actually requesting. This intent extractor will analyze this text and identify what is the intent. Okay. Once you know the intent, the rest is just normal programming. So sentiment analysis not quite being used for that. This is more for intent analysis, while sentiment analysis may be used alongside with intent to do more decision making on what kind of reply they want to send back. But in Facebook, I don't think they use that lah. Sentiment analysis is more closer to how you say a politician. We want to know what people say about him, or a politician want to know whether a bunch of people hates him or not, or a company launch a new product and they want to know how many people hate the product, how many people love the product. So that's where most of the time sentiment analysis is used. Sentiment analysis may be used inside this chatbot's purpose, but it's more the advanced stuff might you be using it. The simpler one, they do more of an intent analysis rather than sentiment. What IDE I use for my project? There's two, called Vim, and if it's not Vim, it'll be VS Code. But most of the time, it's actually Vim and VS Code. Like these are the usual thing that I usually use. I don't use more complex IDE because they are distracting. But Vim to me is the one I've been using since I start programming. It's just a text editor, and to me it's nicer already. A lot of IDE are just too distracting. VS Code is good. It's not too distracting compared to other IDE.
Mr. Izhar, can you show us the Vim interface?
Vim interface. Okay, let me just
Because
open
in class I teach them using PyCharm, and another one is Google Colab for
Vim.
data analysis.
Vim is just a command line text editor. It's just this. So I just start programming whatever I want. So if I want to do, say for example, I want to do text replacement. So here it's mostly operated by a keyboard. So if I want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say I want to replace text, do a text replacement that day. So one is I want to change 1 to 9, for example. I can just do something like that. So all the 1 become 9. So Vim is more like this only lah. It's just a command line text editor like this. Not for everybody, but it's something that I really like using. Yeah, even my VS Code also I install Vim plugin there so that I make sure I code it very similar to Vim. But I don't think it's for everybody lah. But I think for now, at the moment, I would recommend VS Code lah. You have quite a bit of data analysis plugin recently they introduced. Okay. So Vim, unless you are IT guy, no point. Then probably there's no real need for you to use it. Okay. Because Python, because it's simple, a lot of time I don't need an IDE to assist me in programming. It's just the text editor is more than enough. If it's in Windows, it's Notepad++.
Can you illustrate maybe running one simple program for the student to show how the text editor works?
Okay, if you're using a text editor, let's say I want. Okay. If you're using text editor, let's say I want to have a simple my app.py, and now you start to program print hello world, example kan. Okay. Once you just create the text file, you save your code, you just do a Python my app.py and you just get hello world there. So this is especially, this kind of flow of programming is, if you're using Linux or using Mac, then you can use this flow quite efficiently. If you're using Windows, you are a bit more reliant on IDE because Windows cannot do this kind of thing quite easily lah. Okay. In Windows, there is this thing called WSL, which allow you to use Linux inside Windows, which then you can use this style of programming. But yeah, this is how most of the time I just write some files, do whatever I want. Let's say if we go to a project, like go from a more complex project, right? Here there's a lot of Python files, so I want to edit some code here. Let's say .py. So I built my program, more complex program. Every time I want to edit a file, I just go and edit the file using Vim like that. And then when I want to run it, I just in Python, in more this is a command that I use to shortcut to run the thing lah. This is actually another script, then a Python script. Okay, then I just run that command to do things. So with Vim, unless you're a Linux user, I think probably not suitable for you guys. But for VS Code, yeah, something like this. So here you're using Vim kat bawah sini juga. But yeah, so this is more like a VS Code environment lah, where Once you dah do things, then you can just use run there to run your program. Okay. Right. Atom and Sublime also quite nice. Yeah, I mean, I found Atom. Okay, I tried Atom before, but at least that time when I was trying it, it's a bit crashy. Sublime, no, never tried that. It's not open source, so I didn't use it. Okay. Yeah. Atom. Yeah, I haven't been touching Atom for quite some time. Okay, so this is VS Code lah. But I think VS Code and Vim not too much different. It's just a bunch of text file there. And then after that, you just run your program just as which you run on the terminal. So I would suggest people to take a look at VS Code mainly because of some of the extension here, like the Jupyter extension, which allow allow you to write some simple scripts and then visualize it at Jupyter on the side. But I rarely use this, so I'm not familiar how to use it. Yeah, there's a number of extensions here that will help in improving your programming experience. Yeah. Okay. This one is just too many things out here. Okay. Any more? You're using Atom? You're using VS Code also, okay. Right. Any more questions? What you mean by suggestions? Do you mean which version control software to use or which practice to use? If you're talking about which version control software to use, right now, I would say just use JIT. But if you're talking about practice, okay, version control, there is quite a bit of discipline kalau nak, especially you want to do with a team lah. So let's just find, there's one guide somewhere. What was the name of the thing? Git. Apa macam ni ya? Git. Best practice lah. So there are one article. I remember there was one document that you can learn a bit more. Some of the ebooks here. No, not this guy. But there is some of the usual philosophy that people will follow lah. Why so many at this one? So some usual philosophy. You don't commit. You don't commit benda yang tak ada kaitan. That's one. Commit regularly. A lot of small commits are better than one big commit, because in a team you want to be able to have the team review a particular commit and decide whether that commit is good or not. So if you commit a big chunk of code, that one very difficult for other to review, and at the same time nak undo susah because you are undoing a whole chunk in one go. Yeah, and you don't commit half done work. Only if it's done, only you submit it. Ideally, you should test before you commit, because a best practice, the main master branch should be code base that is always working. You don't want to break your master branch. Commit messages have to be meaningful, and don't use as a backup system. Don't upload very big files kalau boleh into your Git repo. And if you're working in a big team, or even a team of two, more than one person lah kan, use branches. This way, collaboration will be easier, where one person will govern the master branch, and then the rest of the people will be the rest of the people will be working on their own branch and then send a pull request to the master branch. workflow, this one is more of a collaboration. So if you have a team of people, you have to decide a rule with your team on how the master branch will be governed, macam mana kita punya what you call this, approval flow. So this one is more of a, so generally those are usual best practices lah that we use. Most programmer also we just tell the same thing. Okay. So how to practice with it? Just keep on using it, I guess. Ideally, kalau if you have a team, like if you have 2 or 3 guys, kan, you start to among yourself, start to try to apply the discipline with your Git repo. If you're 2 or 3 person working on the same project, so try to apply that discipline. That will help you to get the hang of the flow and the practice. Because a lot of time people are just doing coding their alone, kan. When they coding alone, a lot of the feature are actually not really important. Branching is not important when you're coding alone. The whole keeping master always be working is not important if you're working alone. But if you are working in a team, then all these best practices start to come in play. And good to try it out with some friends before you kena marah dengan some your senior guys. I use Linux full time. Yeah, I stopped using Windows 15 years ago. So if you ask me how to use Windows, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I stopped using Windows like 15 years ago. Been a long time since I last touched Windows. Like the last time I touched Windows is just like quick launch some application, some web browser, and that's it. Reinforcement learning got market in Malaysia or not? I'm not sure. You probably be better off if you want to go more into reinforcement learning, kan? I would say identify companies that do more on, they do a product. Because in Malaysia, a lot of companies, they are project-driven companies. Where this kind of skill set not really needed in a project company. What would be useful is to join a product company macam those apa nama, e-commerce systems, people who are building apps, because product company are more likely to require this kind of skill set, while project companies not quite. Okay. Market condition for mobile app development, there's always requests out there, but because there's so many freelancers, the daily rate also have dropped quite a bit. So if you are looking at corporate mobile app development, there's still quite a bit. I think a lot of companies still want mobile app. A lot of startups want mobile app. Is mainly the matter of can you compete with the freelancers that really lowball ridiculously or not lah. Because there's a usual risk where there's too many freelancers yang just lowball the the prices. Okay. We don't do the mobile app development, however, because too many freelancers susah compete. They charge very cheap. Okay, any more? My go-to Linux distro, considering I'm a Fedora ambassador, I've been using Fedora since like 15 plus years, 16 years ago. I'm using Fedora as my primary Linux distro. And for server side, I'll be using CentOS. That's the main flow. There is a reason why I like Fedora, because architecturally to me it's have a more solid architecture, while the Debian side to me is a bit messy. And on the same time, because the enterprise market are using mostly Red Hat, knowing Fedora and Red Hat is derived from Fedora, so knowing Fedora will help you a lot in the industry where you'll be interacting quite a bit with Red Hat based and CentOS based servers out there. Okay. So if you're an IT guy and you want to learn more in something that is closer to the industry, Fedora will be a better choice. Or you just go for CentOS. Okay. Any more? May I know example of Django? Can you rephrase that question? What do you mean by example of Django? You want me to run a training on how to build a Django app or what? So that one I think it'll take quite a longer time, and I don't use Django, so I'm not familiar sangat how to build it quickly to demo it live right now. Which website or product are you using it? Okay, there's a big, they have a list there. So Django punya ni, Django users. Bukan no. Django. Then we just take a look at Django punya documentation. Who uses it? There is a list. They used to have a list somewhere here. Where is it? They used to have a list somewhere here. About So discuss Magenta Foundation. So this is within Django. Oh, Instagram is in Django. Night Foundation is in Django. So Instagram is built on Django. Discuss here is built on Django. Mozilla website is built on Django. Okay. What else? Already hilang. Okay, I just close it out too many tabs. Pinterest is also in Django. Okay, so that's quite a bit of Django users out there. These are some highlights. So there are others, smaller sites out there, plenty, a lot of freelancers doing Django things. Okay. My mini project during my study time was a forum. I tried to build something because if you're an IT guy and if a software engineering guy again, I generally recommend trying to build a forum or blog as part of your mini project. At least one of the mini project should be a forum or a blog, because when you try to do a forum of a blog, you'll figure out how to build an application that Satu can do create, read, update, delete. Dua is that you need to have authentication, which is not easy to build also a lot of time. So you need to build the authentication system, you need to build the access control system, you need to make sure that the security is correct so that somebody who log in as a different person cannot edit other person punya post. So mini project, for my opinion, forum or blog is a good mini project to have when you are learning something. Okay, so I remember when I was a student, I was just trying out Django to build some forum system. Learn quite a bit during that time lah, how to secure stuff correctly, how to building login system, remembering sessions, stuff like that. Okay. Nowadays I just latch to whatever improving existing project other than mini project. Any more?
Any more questions? For Mr. Izhar, how do you develop your interest towards the computer programming during your learning time?
How you develop interest in computer programming?
What makes you fall in love in what you are doing now?
I mean, I've been programming since sekolah rendah, so so the part where making things move, that's the first thing that trigger my interest lah. Because when I was a student masa sekolah, I think it was like what? I think I like my dad that time pick up this one software, learn to program in Basic, and that that software teaches us to how to develop some simple games. That time, the thing that made me interested with programming was that making things smooth. Basically, just that was the first thing that triggered it. And then after that, at school, I learned algebra. So then I so from there, some programming idioms start to make sense. Because when I first learned programming, I never learned algebra yet. So then the more and more I start to able to relate it with the schoolwork, like when in university, in sekolah menengah, you learn about functions, then you realize that you've been using functions in programming for quite some time. Then you're able to relate it back. That's where it started lah. And then nowadays programming to me is just a natural language I use to automate things. Yeah. So, but I think if you are trying to make somebody interested in programming when they're new, the first thing that need to be done, that they need to have some small achievements. Something small. Let's say, in my example just now, you use a simple programming language to move some turtle around or something like that. You use Scratch to move some icon moving around. You use programming to maybe do simple calculation of your mathematical work, for example. So small achievements will keep the interest going. If you try to build something big from the start, chances are you just burn yourself out before you achieve anything.
So in this session, we have the first year student and the second year student. So second year student now, they are in the middle of doing their finding the ideas on developing their first graphical user interface. So that is the very the objective of this talk today. So the first year student will be taking the subject next year. But I noticed that most of the students have lack of interest towards computer programming, so that makes they learn it through the hard way.
Okay. Alright. On that part, okay, to me, doing into graphical when you are new, that's a little bit big. Should start first and using a simple command line. Maybe with a simple command line calculator first. Once you get a command line calculator working, then you try to build a GUI out of it. That's a bit more more staggered lah, rather than try to jump straight to GUI. Because GUI programming have its own set of quirks, which I think it takes a bit time to learn on how to understand how the GUI interact with the system also.
Oh, this is very simple GUI. I mean not to the level of apps.
Okay.
Just the interface that coming out from the PyCharm. I'm using PyCharm.
Okay, so no buttons interaction apa semua.
Just the button, the click button,
Okay.
and menu button and so on.
Okay, you can try first. Because at least for me, I believe to go for stagger, but I think it depends on how things are coordinated. There's always ways to make people get it to work. Because I myself, when I first built program, I didn't go into GUI for quite lambat juga Most of the time, I just use command line things. Only like, I think sekolah menengah where I start to have some GUI stuff. But previously, when I was only early started, the GUI is provided by the platform that I'm using. I don't build GUI myself. Only after I start to learn HTML, where I start to learn GUI.
All right, any more questions from the audience, students?
Best practice for storing databases for novice. Keep it flat, I guess. Keep it flat as in you don't try to do nested tables. But generally speaking, as long as you just store it macam you store as a CSV file, that's already good enough already. You have a column, you have a bunch of columns, and you have a bunch of rows. That's it. Don't try to make things more complicated than that. If you make things more complicated than that, things can get very complicated after that. And that's the best practice for storing database. Any advice on becoming data scientist? I think main thing is general purpose data scientist will probably find it a bit tricky to find their place. I would suggest to pick up a domain. You need to have something, a domain that is your primary punya focus. Say for example, you want to go into petroleum industry. If you want to be data scientist in the petroleum industry, you need to learn some petroleum science. Or if you want to go more into insurance ke apa ke, you start to pick up actuarial science. If you want to go into image processing, then you learn a bit more on how image analysis to work lah. So you need to pick a domain because general purpose is a bit tricky to sell. Domain specific data scientists who are specializing on specific domain are a bit more in demand right now lah. Okay. Okay, any more?
Any more questions? I think they don't have any questions. So maybe before we end our session, we have the photo session first. Okay, can I ask all the students to on your video?
Okay, so I'll just stop presenting.
Yeah. Alright, can the rest of the participants to switch on your video so that we can have a screenshot of this session?
Can see everybody? Yo, 80 plus people. Okay.
Yeah, I try to. Alright, so okay, I can see Saiful, Musin, Akram, Syamimi, Dr. Norianti. Alright, so 1, 2, 3. Alright. Thank you so much, everybody. So I think we stop here. So I would like to thank Mr. Izhar for the very informative talk. So I hope that the students will have a better idea in doing your project especially. And thank you for already active participation during this talk. So I will share the recorded video to everybody after this. And thank you once again, Mr. Izhar. And for the students, do not forget to fill in your attendance.
I hope you guys learn something during this talk. Right? Have fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Right, thank you.